The Consumer Price Index is one of the most widely used measures in computing inflation, although, as you will find out today, it used to not measure the price level all that accurately. Welcome to the very first episode of Planet Econ. When you hear the word inflation, what comes to mind? Do you think about having to pay higher prices to buy the same goods and services? This is the exact approach that the Consumer Price Index, aka CPI, uses to measure inflation. The CPI is calculated by tracking how much it would cost to buy a fixed basket of goods and services at different points in time. The basket of goods and services is chosen with the intention of representing what is consumed by a typical consumer. In the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics sends out many workers with a bunch of special, funky-looking computers to collect the prices of certain food items, apparel, entertainment services, and a list of other things that the typical consumer buys. And after the prices are collected and aggregated, the total price of all these items in the base year is normalized to the nice round number of 100. The CPI value of all other years is calculated relative to the price level of the base year. So, if we see a CPI index of 125, it means that relative to the base year, the price of the basket of goods and services has increased by 25%. In other words, a 25% inflation has occurred. Thus, if a year has a CPI value that is higher than 100, its price level is higher than that of the base year. And if a year has a CPI value that is lower than 100, its price level is lower than that of the base year. So far, the CPI sounds like the perfect measure of inflation, right? Not so fast. First of all, inflation actually doesn't exactly mean paying higher prices to buy the same basket of goods. Inflation actually means paying higher prices to maintain the same level of living standards. Is this actual definition of inflation all that different from paying higher prices to buy the same goods? As it turns out, the answer is a big yes. For those of you out there who wear glasses, say you find yourself needing a new pair of glasses tomorrow, and it just so happens that the price for a pair of glasses skyrocketed tonight overnight, but the prices of everything else stayed pretty much the same. Would you go broke buying a new pair of glasses? Or just get on with life without the ability to see clearly? Most of you would probably choose neither of these options, but rather substitute by buying some contact lenses and then carry on with life at a similar quality as before. However, notice that eyeglasses are in the basket of the CPI. So according to the traditionally defined CPI, in this situation, you would go on demanding eyeglasses in the exact same amount, because a fixed basket does not take into account substitution effects. It is estimated that this and other reasons cause the CPI to overestimate the price level by about 1.1% each year. You might think that this effect is small, but by the 1980s, this overestimation actually caused the total debt of the US government to be more than $270 billion higher than it would have been if inflation were estimated correctly, since Social Security payments and many other federal outlays are indexed to the CPI. Fortunately, in 1999, the BLS adopted measures to take substitution effects into account when constructing the CPI. Another source of problem for the CPI is quality change in goods. Traditionally, whenever the quality of a good got better or worse, the CPI just went like, I don't see the quality change. I don't acknowledge the quality change. To me, the good is exactly the same as it was before. Think about cell phones when they were first invented. Remember those big, clunky phones? The phones we have now are certainly not the same as the phones back then. Paying a higher price to buy a better good isn't really inflation. So here, once again, the CPI traditionally overestimated inflation. Nowadays, though, the BLS tries to address this issue with something called hedonic price adjustments. This process is not an exact science, but it's certainly much better than not trying to address the issue at all. Another point is that life simply changes a lot over the years. The current CPI series goes back to 1913, but if you compare the current CPI level with the CPI in 1913, that is sketchy business. Remember how I told you the CPI's basket was fixed? Sorry, it's not exactly like that. Over very short periods of time, the CPI's basket is fixed, but the BOS uses consumer surveys to update the basket slightly as time passes. So over long periods of time, you are certainly not comparing the price people need to pay to get the same level of living standards. Back in the early 20th century, the internet, wireless phone services, and medical care up to the current standards were simply not available. Even though these things are all in our current CPI basket, it is a little hard to find which specific items are in the historical CPI baskets in the US. But the Office for National Statistics in the UK has put together a very interesting website where you can explore how old-fashioned items like corsets, ringers, and the VHS all had their turn being a part of the CPI basket. I have put the link to the website in the description below. If you don't know what a winger or bangle is, it is basically a manually operated machine that squishes water from wet laundry. And I think that just drives home the point that life back then is not exactly comparable to life nowadays. All in all, the CPI, as things currently stand, is a pretty good measure of inflation. As estimation methodologies improve, I have no doubt that the quality of CPI as a basis for inflation will continue to improve. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and consider supporting Planet Econ on Patreon. Stay inquisitive, and see you next time.